I never meant to want Ryan Mitchell. That's the part one repeat to myself when I think about how everything began, before the storm, before the steam, before the sound of his wedding ring tapping against my bathroom tile. Back when the only thing between us was a thin apartment wall and the lie that he was just my straight neighbor. My name is Ethan Cole, and I moved into apartment 3B because it was affordable and quiet. I wanted simple. I wanted predictable. I had learned the hard way that wanting complicated things only left bruises you couldn't explain to anyone. Ryan Mitchell lived in 3A. I met him on move-in day. He was carrying a box marked kitchen and wearing a grey t-shirt damp with sweat from the August heat. He smiled first, easy, confident, the kind of smile that assumed the world would smile back. I noticed the gold band on his finger before I noticed anything else. It felt safer that way. Ryan, he said, shifting the box to offer his hand. Ethan. His grip was firm, steady. Married. Straight. Off limits. I repeated those words silently, like rules posted on a wall I refused to cross. A week later, I met Lena Mitchell in the hallway. She was warm in a quieter way, polite and observant. She thanked me for helping Ryan with a stuck door hinge. I told her it was nothing. She smiled like she meant it. The walls between our apartments were thin. I learned their routines without trying. Ryan's early morning alarm. Lena's soft laugh in the evenings. The muted hum of their television at night. It was ordinary domestic music, and I told myself I was just another neighbor overhearing it. But Ryan started knocking. At first, it was small things. Borrowing a screwdriver. Asking if my Wi-Fi was acting up too. Returning a misdelivered package. Each visit lasted a little longer than necessary. He would lean against my kitchen counter as if testing how comfortable he felt there. "You live alone?" he asked once, glancing around my neat living room. "Yeah," he nodded slowly. "Must be peaceful." There was something in the way he said it that didn't sound like admiration. It sounded like longing. Over time, the knocks came without excuses. Sometimes he would just stand in my doorway and ask how work was going. I told him about freelance design deadlines. He told me about his job in sales and how draining it felt to perform all day. "With you, I don't have to perform," he said one evening, half laughing. "You're easy to talk to." The comment lingered long after he left. I told myself it meant nothing. Straight men can appreciate conversation. Married men can feel stressed. It didn't mean he was searching for something outside his marriage. It certainly didn't mean I should hope he was. But I began noticing the pauses. The way his eyes held mine a fraction too long. The way his shoulder brushed mine in my narrow kitchen, even when there was room to avoid it. The way his voice dropped when he said my name. One night, I heard raised voices through the wall. Ryan and Lena arguing, not explosive, just exhausted. Words like distance and trying floated through the drywall. I turned my television on to drown it out, but the tension stayed with me. The next afternoon, Ryan knocked again. He didn't smile this time. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited and exhaled like my apartment was oxygen. "Do you ever feel," he began, running a hand through his hair, "like you're living the life you're supposed to have instead of the one you actually want?" The question caught in my throat. I could have answered honestly, but honesty felt dangerous. "I think everyone feels that way sometimes," I said instead. He studied me carefully. "Yeah, maybe." Silence stretched between us, thicker than usual. He didn't move toward the door. I didn't ask him to leave. "You're different, Ethan," he said quietly. "You listen." I forced a small smile. "That's what neighbors do." His gaze softened, and for a moment the air shifted, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't physical yet. It was something more fragile and more reckless, recognition. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint crease between his brows. "Have you ever wanted something you shouldn't?" he asked. The question landed harder than he knew. I could hear Lena moving around next door through the wall behind him. Plates clinking, cabinets closing, the ordinary sounds of a marriage still intact. I swallowed. "Ryan," I said carefully, "you're married." He didn't step back. "I know," he replied. And in the quiet that followed, I understood something had already begun, something neither of us had named, but both of us felt pressing against the thin wall between our lives. That was the first crack. The storm rolled in just after midnight. Rain struck the windows with impatient force, and thunder rattled the frames like a warning. I told myself it was only weather, only noise, but my thoughts kept circling back to Ryan Mitchell and the way he had said I know when I reminded him he was married. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I turned on the shower, letting the steady rush of water drown out both the storm and my conscience. Steam filled the bathroom, blurring the mirror, softening the edges of everything. It felt safer in there, contained, muted, private. I stepped under the spray and let the heat settle into my shoulders. For a few minutes, I managed not to think about him. Then someone knocked on my door. At first, I assumed I imagined it. The storm was loud enough to disguise almost anything. But the knock came again, firm, urgent. I shut off the water, wrapped a towel around my waist, and padded to the door, heart thudding harder than it should have. When I opened it, Ryan stood there, soaked through. His hair clung to his forehead, and rain darkened his t-shirt until it nearly matched the night outside. Water dripped from his sleeves onto my hallway floor. "Sorry," he said, breathless. "Our water heater just died. Lena's at her sister's again, and he ran a hand over the back of his neck. "Can I use your shower? Just 5 minutes. 5 minutes. The request should have been simple. Neighborly. Harmless. But nothing about Ryan felt harmless anymore. "You could have waited until morning," I said, though I already knew I wouldn't send him back into the storm. He gave me a crooked smile. I didn't want to. The honesty in that answer unsettled me more than the rain. I stepped aside. Ryan moved past me like he belonged there, like my apartment was an extension of his own. He kicked off his shoes by the door and peeled his soaked shirt over his head without hesitation, leaving it in a damp heap on the floor. I looked away, not because I hadn't imagined him like that before, but because imagining was safer than witnessing. "The bathroom's still warm," I said quietly. "I just got out." He paused at that, glancing back at me. Something unreadable passed across his face. "You were in there?" he asked. "Yeah." Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to make the lights flicker. Ryan walked into the bathroom without waiting for more explanation. Steam still lingered in the air, curling around him as if it had been waiting. I followed, not sure why. The space felt smaller with both of us inside, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with size. Ryan turned the water back on, testing the temperature with his hand. "You don't mind?" he asked, though his voice lacked doubt. I should have left then. I should have given him privacy. Instead, I stayed. He met my eyes through the haze. "You don't have to pretend with me, Ethan." The words landed softly but carried weight. "I'm not pretending," I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. Ryan stepped closer, not touching, just close enough that the air between us thinned. Rain battered the windows in the next room. Water rushed steadily behind him. The storm outside and the steam inside blurred into the same restless rhythm. "I keep thinking about what you said," he admitted. "About me being married." "You are," I replied. He nodded once. "Yeah, I am." But he didn't move away. Instead, he reached out, slowly, deliberately, and brushed his fingers against my forearm. The contact was light, almost accidental. Almost. Every nerve in my body reacted. Ryan's expression shifted, the confidence I knew replaced by something more vulnerable. "I don't know what this makes me," he said quietly. "I just know that when I'm here, it feels honest." The word honest twisted inside me. There was nothing honest about standing in a bathroom with a married man while his wife believed he was home. "You're confused," I managed. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm not confused about wanting to be here." The water continued to run, hot and relentless, filling the room with thick, clouded air. Ryan's hand slid from my arm to my wrist, firmer now. Intentional. The world narrowed to the space between us. "Tell me to leave," he said. I opened my mouth. No sound came out. His forehead hovered inches from mine, breath warm, unsteady. There was no rush in his movements, no recklessness, just a slow surrender to something we had both been circling for weeks. When he leaned in, it wasn't desperation. It was decision. The storm roared outside, but inside the only sound I heard was my own heartbeat, and the quiet, irreversible understanding that whatever happened next would not stay contained within these walls. And I didn't tell him to leave. The morning after the storm, the hallway felt like neutral territory after a quiet war. I left for work earlier than usual, hoping to avoid Ryan Mitchell. I told myself distance would restore clarity. It didn't. Every step down the stairs replayed the previous night, the steam, his hand at my wrist, the silence I chose instead of restraint. When I returned that evening, his door was closed. No knock. No text, no sign that anything had shifted. For a moment, I wondered if I had imagined the intensity of it all, if the storm had distorted reality. But at 10:17 p.m., my phone lit up. Ryan, we need to talk. 3 words. Controlled. Measured. I stared at the message longer than necessary before replying. Me. Okay. He knocked 5 minutes later. Ryan looked different in dry clothes. Composed. Guarded. The vulnerability from the night before had been tucked away, replaced with something more cautious. I'm not here to pretend it didn't happen, he said as soon as I closed the door. Good, I replied, though my pulse betrayed me. He paced once across my living room before facing me. I've never done anything like that. I didn't ask him to clarify. I knew what he meant. With anyone, I asked carefully. He hesitated. No, the answer should have steadied me. Instead, it deepened the weight of it all. Ryan exhaled sharply. I don't know what this means. About me. About anything. You're married, I said again, because it was the only solid ground I could find. He flinched slightly at the repetition. Lena and I haven't been okay for a long time. That doesn't make this right. His jaw tightened. So what was it, then? A mistake. The question wasn't defensive. It was searching. I thought about the way he had looked at me through the steam, not confused, not drunk, not reckless. Present. It wasn't an accident, I said. But that doesn't mean it's simple. Ryan studied me with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. When I'm with you, Ethan, I don't feel like I'm pretending to be anything. And with Lena, he looked away. That silence answered more than words could. After that night, we didn't stop. We just redefined what stopping meant. Ryan began coming over later, after the lights in his apartment dimmed. Sometimes we talked for hours about nothing and everything, his dissatisfaction at work, my reluctance to trust anyone fully, the way he felt boxed in by expectations he'd never questioned before. He never used the word affair. Neither did I. We told ourselves it was conversation, exploration, honesty. But honesty doesn't hide in the dark. One evening, I heard raised voices through the wall again. Lena's tone sharper than before. Ryan's quieter, defensive. You're somewhere else even when you're standing in front of me, she said. The words traveled clearly through the drywall. I sat on my couch, guilt pressing into my ribs. An hour later, Ryan knocked. His eyes were tired, shadowed. She thinks I'm distracted. You are, I said. He didn't deny it. She asked if there's someone else, he added. My stomach tightened. And I said no. The lie landed between us, heavy and immediate. You didn't hesitate, I asked. His gaze flickered. I didn't know how to explain this. There it was, the quiet selfishness of it all. He wanted what he felt with me without confronting what it cost. I don't want to be a secret, I said, surprising myself. Ryan stepped closer. You're not. Then what am I? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached for my hand like it was instinct. You're the only place I feel understood, he said softly. It was exactly what I wanted to hear. And exactly what made this dangerous. Days blurred into a pattern of stolen hours and cautious distance in daylight. We passed each other in the hallway like nothing was different. Lena smiled at me once, unaware, trusting. That trust felt like a spotlight. One afternoon, she knocked on my door unexpectedly. Hey, Ethan, Lena said gently. Have you seen Ryan? He's not answering his phone. My throat tightened. He was inside my bedroom, silent. No, I lied. The word came out too easily. Lena thanked me and walked back to her apartment, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't desire this time. It was recognition. This wasn't just about confusion anymore. It was betrayal. When I closed the door, Ryan stepped out slowly. She believes you, he said. I nodded. He looked almost relieved. That was the moment I understood. The storm hadn't shattered things. The silence afterward had. And silence, I was beginning to realize, doesn't hold forever. The end didn't arrive with another storm. It came quietly, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, when the air felt still and deceptive. I heard Lena Mitchell's voice first. Not raised, sharp, controlled in the way anger becomes when it has proof. Through the thin wall between 3A and 3B, I caught fragments. Don't lie to me again. A pause. Who is he, Ryan? My chest tightened. There was no mistaking the direction of that question. Silence stretched long enough to make my pulse roar in my ears. Then Ryan's voice, low and stripped of its usual confidence. I didn't mean for this to happen. Not denial, not confusion, admission. Something inside me sank. Lena's voice cracked next. So it's real. Another pause. Yes. The word was barely audible, but it carried the weight of a collapsed life. I stood motionless in my living room, staring at nothing, listening to a marriage fracture in real time. There was no triumph in it. No sense of victory. Only a dull, spreading ache that felt heavier than guilt. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. I knew it was him before I opened it. Ryan stood there with a suitcase in one hand and a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His face looked drained, as if someone had stripped away the ease he once wore so naturally. She found the messages, he said. I stepped aside without speaking. He walked in slowly this time, not like he belonged there, more like he wasn't sure he belonged anywhere. She went through my phone while I was in the shower, he continued. I didn't even try to delete them. There was no pride in his honesty now. Only exhaustion. What did you tell her? I asked. The truth. The word settled differently than it had before. The truth no longer felt intimate. It felt destructive. Ryan set the suitcase near my couch and looked around my apartment like he was seeing it for the first time, not as a hiding place, but as a destination. She told me to leave, he said quietly. So I did. The implication hung between us. You're here, I said. Yeah. He met my eyes, vulnerability replacing certainty. I left, Ethan. For me. For us. This was the moment we had been moving toward for weeks. No more secrecy. No more whispered visits after dark. No more thin walls separating one life from another. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of something irreversible. Can I stay here? Ryan asked. The question was simple. The answer wasn't. If I said yes, this would become real in a way it hadn't been before. Not stolen moments. Not emotional refuge. A choice. I studied him carefully. Without Lena in the next apartment, without the structure of his marriage holding him in place, Ryan looked untethered. Less confident. Almost unsure of who he was without the role he had always played. Do you love her? I asked. The question startled him. He hesitated. I care about her. That's not what I asked. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, pacing once before stopping in front of me. I don't know what love is supposed to feel like anymore. There it was. Not clarity. Not certainty. Confusion. I realized then that I hadn't fallen for a man who had chosen me. I had fallen for a man who was trying to escape himself. You didn't leave because you're sure about me, I said quietly. You left because you got caught. His expression tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. The silence this time felt different from the others. Not charged. Not tempting. Honest. I don't want to be the reason your marriage ended, I continued. And I don't want to be the place you run when you don't know who you are. Ryan's shoulders slumped slightly, as if the weight of the past few weeks had finally settled. So what are you saying? He asked. I'm saying you need to figure out who you are without hiding behind me. Or behind her. The words hurt to say, but they felt steady. Ryan looked at the suitcase by the couch, then back at me. The certainty he once carried was gone. In its place was something raw and unsettled. You're not choosing me, he said quietly. I'm choosing not to repeat the same mistake. A long pause passed between us. Finally, Ryan picked up the suitcase. I never meant to hurt anyone, he said. I know, I replied. But we did. He nodded once, then walked toward the door. This time, when it closed behind him, it didn't feel like anticipation. It felt like consequence. Weeks later, I learned Lena had filed for separation. Ryan moved out of the building shortly after. I never saw him again. Sometimes, when it rains, I remember the night he stepped into my shower and the way we both mistook desire for honesty. The wall between our apartments is still there. But what we shattered that night wasn't drywall. It was the illusion that wanting something makes it right.